Welcome back to the Barrel Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode of Let's Talk About It. In today's episode, we got a lot to break down. I'm going to start off talking about some dream and nightmare scenarios for mainly the teams that I think are real, legitimate threats in the playoffs. And then we're going to go talk about one question I have for really kind of a question-ish for every team, kind of one thing I worry about for every team that is considered a playoff team. And then we have a star that I believe is being very disrespected in the league today. And then we can talk about the MVP award kind of being super narrative driven over the past couple of years. That's kind of led us to this MVP race. But we can start out with dreams and nightmare scenarios for the East and the West. Starting out with the East, I really only think it's a 4 to 5 team race depending on who you're talking to. In my opinion, it's a 5-team race. Boston Celtics, obviously the best team in basketball, been the best team in basketball throughout the entirety of the season. And kind of looking at what the question is around this team is more so, can they get it done? This team obviously is good enough to win a championship. This is honestly one of the best teams I've seen play with my own two eyes in a long time, it feels like. Especially, this is like giving me KD Warriors-esque vibes with how good this team is. They are like blowing teams out of the water. And these are good, competent teams that they're just blowing out of the water. They had a game against the Dallas Mavericks where they just really just took control of the game and kind of blew them out. They just beat the Warriors by 50. And the Warriors have been one of the hottest teams post-All-Star break. So, I mean, it's saying something, these teams that they are beating. And this is one of the best fitting teams. I had questions about the fit to start the year, but this team is fitting together so nicely. And this is a lot of these games without Kristaps Porzingis, who has been out with injuries. But this team is obviously dangerous. They're obviously good enough to win the championship. It's more so the question I have, can they get it done? We've seen this team be talented in the past, kind of flare out in the playoffs and not be able to reach their fullest potential. In the year that they did go to the finals, I remember going into that series, many people didn't give Golden State a chance to win the series. It was mainly in favor of Boston winning the series, and they got handled in 6 games. So this team obviously is talented. It's more so, can they get it done? We will see. But a dream scenario, so breaking down these kind of dream and nightmare scenarios, I have it more so either a possible matchup in the playoffs or based off the first round. Because in the West, it's so bundled up right now to where like these matchups could happen and could not happen based on a week or two into the next couple of weeks into the season. But looking at the East, it's more so set in stone kind of with looking at the standings now of what's really going to happen in the playoffs. So looking at a dream scenario for the Boston Celtics, in my opinion, is playing the Cavaliers. If you can play the Cavaliers in the second round, most likely, that seeming the route is going in the East. These are more so second round matchups for the East rather than first round. And the West is more so first and second round matchups. But in the East, if they match up with the Cavs in the second round compared to like the Knicks or the Bucks or the Heat, I think this is a W because I just don't believe the Cavs have enough offensive firepower consistently to beat Boston. I do love the front court defense that they do have, but with Kristaps Porzingis kind of negating some of Jared Allen's powers in a way, being able to space the floor, taking him out of the paint, I think it really negates a lot of the things Cleveland likes to do. And if you're not getting all-time performance after all-time performance from Donovan Mitchell, offensively, they don't have the firepower to really compete, and they don't have the defense on the perimeter to really compete with the Boston team, even with how good Cleveland has been playing this year. But Donovan Mitchell is also out with a knee injury right now, so the health and everything else with this team, I just think they're a bad matchup with Boston. I don't think they match up well with them at all, depending on even injuries and stuff like that. If both teams are fully healthy, I really think Boston would probably sweep the Cavs, in my opinion, because they just don't have enough. They just don't. Nightmare scenarios. Now, there is one team, both East and West, that I have with no real nightmare scenario because I feel like they could beat anybody. But for Boston, Boston is a team that I think can play down to their competition. They can get away from what they do well. And I think they can kind of get lost in a game with what they do. I feel like that's kind of happened the past couple of playoff runs to where they'll be in a game against Golden State and kind of lose what got them the lead and stop doing what got them the lead. Same with Miami. They stopped doing what was working and allowed Miami to take control of the series and allowed Golden State to regain control of the series. So Looking at a nightmare scenario, I do think it's Miami, just because of how Miami plays them. They always play them tough. Miami plays everybody, all these top contending teams for the past couple of years, play them tough. We know what Miami is capable of come playoff time. Regular season, they coast, and they consistently prove it again to turn it up in the playoffs. They have a playoff riser in Jimmy Butler. You got to think the past playoff run that they had, Tyler Hero wasn't healthy. You added Terry Rozier. I know Terry Rozier's been up and down. You add those two. You add more scoring firepower to your backcourt. You know your defense is going to be sound and elite. Miami's a team that nobody wants to face. You can say, all these fan bases can say, oh, we're not worried about Miami. We ain't worried about... Promise y'all don't want to see Miami in the playoffs. Nobody does. Nobody ever does. If you ask me, a team of a fan base like Boston or Milwaukee or the Knicks, would I rather play Orlando or Miami? I guarantee you're going to say Orlando. So Miami matches up with all these teams well at the top of the Eastern Conference. I do think Miami can give every one of these teams a run for their money, even with how talented Boston is. I think they do match up well because of Bam Adebayo. He is a Defense Player of the Year waiting to happen. He can guard 1 through 5 confidently. I think the guarding 1 through 5 term gets thrown out so fast, so quick. Bam Adebayo is, in my opinion, the most sound defender in the league, and actually guarding 1 through 5. You can throw him on Tatum, he can be successful. You can throw him on Jaylen Brown, he can be successful. You can throw him on Kristaps, he can be successful. You have a Swiss Army knife like that who can play small, who can play big. You add Jimmy Butler to that situation, I think it could give Boston a run for their money. If the Knicks can get healthy, they have the roster to be able to do it. They have enough talent on their roster, scoring-wise and defensively, and being able to play bigger than Boston could. But it's all about the Knicks' health. Those are two teams just matching up. I think those are the two toughest matchups for Boston in the East. And I think those are nightmare scenarios because you could mess around and get into a world where you play Miami in the second round. If the Knicks get healthy, play the Knicks in the conference finals. Or you can play Miami in the conference finals. We've seen it happen. We've seen Miami go on these crazy runs where they shut teams down. But Boston, head and shoulders above the league right now. I could also see a world where there is no nightmare scenario. And they should get to the finals, in my opinion. They should. But there's teams that can give them problems. Next team, Cavaliers. Main question I have for them, what are they without Donovan Mitchell? Outside of Donovan Mitchell, who else is bringing that scoring? Darius Garland is the first name you think of. Super up and down this year. There's times where I'm like, Darius Garland should take over this game, and he doesn't. But when I'm looking at it, they don't have enough defense on the perimeter. I love their front court defense, but I still feel like they struggle offensively because Evan Mobley and Jared Allen cannot shoot the ball. I think that is the main reason why this offense continues to struggle. And you add that with the fact that they don't really have anybody on the perimeter that can really sit down and guard. I think when you have those two problems, it's very hard to win, especially with the guys that they have to go against in this conference. Now you're adding a Damian Lillard. You're adding Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Derek White, everybody on Boston. You're adding Jalen Brunson, who has been getting his against Cleveland. Gave them everything they could handle last year and bounced them out of the playoffs. So dream scenario for them, 76ers, just because they're still floating around the playoff picture. I do think Philadelphia is still going to be in the top 6 and make the playoffs. And I think Cleveland, if you match up with them in the first round, dream scenario. You should take care of them. They're probably not going to have Joel Embiid. And then you're looking at, this could be a great test. Okay, we get Philadelphia out the way. Boom, we're in the second round. That's already a growth and a step up from last year. Because mess around matchup with Miami, that's a whole different series. You get the Sixers, I think they confidently beat the Sixers in like 5 games. Because the Sixers are a completely different team without Joel Embiid. Nightmare scenario is the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks, healthy or if not, I just watched the Knicks beat the Cavs without Jalen Brunson, OG, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson. So, and Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart took care of business against them. So, the Knicks just have their number. Cavs didn't have Donovan Mitchell, mind you, but I just listed the entire Knicks starting lineup that was out. So, they just have their number. They play more physical. I think the Cleveland struggles to really do anything with Jalen Brunson when they are healthy. I just think last year was a real statement win against them in the playoffs, and to where they kind of are in the psyche of the Cavs a little bit because they just won the season series against the Cavs. I know they won it last year against them, and they beat them in the playoffs. I just think it's a bad matchup because they struggle to guard on the perimeter. And when you have a creator in Jalen Brunson and you have two guys in your front court that can get physical with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, then there's a problem. Then I think you're really lacking. But looking at it, I think the Knicks are just a nightmare scenario. I just believe that the Knicks have the Cavs number. Next team, Milwaukee Bucks. Been hot post All-Star break. Mind you, they haven't played the best teams in the world. I know they played Golden State on Wednesday night in Golden State, I believe. But the main question, can the defense hold up? You have two top 10 guys, however you want to put Damian Lillard in top 10, top 20, wherever you want to put him. But you have two guys, Damian Lillard, playoff performer. We know what he does in the playoffs. Giannis, we know what he does. So it's like, can your defense hold up enough to get you there? Because they're a team where I have their dream scenario being the 76ers because they can take care of business and get to the second round. I think they can clean up work against the Sixers easily, rest up for the second round. Nightmare scenario is going to be Boston and Miami. Boston's the team to beat out East. Milwaukee's easily the second best team out East, in my opinion, even with everybody being healthy, because when you add Giannis and a Dame and the pieces they have around them, something special can come out of that. The only thing that's holding this team back really is Chris Middleton and his injury problems. If you were to add a healthy Chris Middleton going into the year with this team probably looks a lot different. Because Chris Middleton is that guy who can create on his own and be a 3-and-D wing when needed and play off ball. So looking at what their dream scenario is, Sixers, kind of a common theme because they're the team that could possibly match up with a lot of these teams depending on where they are at in the standings right now. So looking at where they should take care of business, and then the nightmare scenario with Miami and Boston, Miami always plays this team well, so they're always going to muck the game up. They're good against Giannis. And then Boston, just because Boston's the team to beat. Next team, New York Knicks. So New York, dream scenario is the Cavs. Like pretty much what I just said about the Cavs and the Knicks, their whole scenario right there. Nightmare scenario is Miami. We saw Miami kind of neutralize them last year in the playoffs. I think that Miami's just such a physical team that they kind of play exactly the way New York wants to play. And I think it can kind of work in New York's favor and not at the same time. But it really comes down to health. That's the main question I have for this team. If they're healthy, I mean, OG Anunoby is one of the best defenders in the league, but they don't really have the chemistry. And with all the injuries right now piling up, I'm more dangerous and scared of this team next year if they can get everybody healthy and on this roster compared to this year, because the chemistry is a real thing. And if they go into the playoffs lacking some of that chemistry, I'm kind of worried. And I think they could possibly get bounced early because you're getting possibly like a 75% Julius Randle. OG Anunoby's been dealing with his injuries. Jalen Brunson just went down with a knee injury, but I'm pretty sure he is playing tonight. They're just riddled with injuries. You can say this is a Tom Thibodeau effect with how much he places guys, but I think that goes into both sides. I think I see both arguments that come with that question, but that's for a whole nother discussion. But then the last team, so out of these 5 teams, I'm still going to put Miami in there because Miami currently is sitting at 7th in the Eastern Conference. I mean, just a couple games back from the 5 seed. So, I mean, they're not really, and they've been relatively hot post All-Star break. Dream scenarios, the Cavs, I think they can just tear apart the Cavs, in my opinion. I think they are way too physical. They are great defense, and the Cavs struggle to guard other guards. And then, nightmare scenario, I don't really have one because Miami is the type of team where I give them the benefit of the doubt with what they have proven to be able to do with top teams of the playoffs that are more talented than them. Like, I like the matchup they can do with the Bucks. I like the matchup with the Knicks. I like the matchup with the Cavs. I like their matchup with Boston. Not saying they can beat any of these teams, but I like the matchup. I think they could really challenge a lot of these teams that are way more talented than them and have more star power than them to really push the series to go 6-7 games. So I think, and I truly do believe, if you're looking at the Eastern Conference right now, You're looking at the top 4 teams: Boston, Milwaukee, Cleveland, New York. Taking Philly out of there because they don't have Joel Embiid, and even if you have a 75% Joel Embiid, it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter. Miami is the only team that is posing any kind of threat outside of the top 4 teams to each other. I think Orlando's still a year or two away. The Pacers, I think, are fun, but they're not going to be guarding anybody. Like, if the Pacers can score all they want to, all these teams have star guys that will get off against the Pacers. The Bulls, nobody's tripping about them, and then the Hawks, nobody's tripping about them. So, the Heat are really the only wild card team that can compete with the top 4 teams. And I think it's very interesting to see, because whoever does get matched up with Miami, I think it's going to be a tough task to deal with Miami, especially in the first round. Miami, even if you beat Miami in a tough 6-7 games, that can have effects on you throughout the rest of your playoff run. So looking at that, we can kind of jump to the West, which the West is a whole different monster. I got 10 teams, all 10 teams that are in the playoffs can pose a threat. Or I could see making a run. All 10 teams. I could see an argument for all 10 teams. That's how deep the Western Conference is. That's how deep it is. That's how much talent is in the West. And it makes me think, kind of like, getting off and segueing into another conversation, is like, when I'm looking at this, it makes me think of, what if there was a world where we didn't have conferences? Because looking at the 10 teams in the West, and then looking at really top 4, and then you add Miami to that, like, obviously if the Sixers were healthy, they'd be in this too, but like without them, I just feel like there's only really 5 teams compared to the 10 out west. So we're going to go ahead and start out with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, main question I have for this team is, I've heard the worries about the offense in the late game. There's been clips and all kinds of stuff about them against the Clippers. But it's more so, will your number 2 guy show up? Will Karl-Anthony Towns show up? We've seen him have his playoff ups and downs. And we've seen Rudy Gobert get kind of taken out of series. So matchup is huge for this team, I feel like, even with being a top 3 seed out west. So it's so huge on the matchup to where I've seen their offensive struggles late in games. Matchup is going to be huge. It's just going to be huge. A dream scenario for them is a team like the Sacramento Kings. A team like Sacramento Kings, a team that is sitting currently 7th. Minnesota's currently the 1 seed. Looking at this, if you can find a world where you match up with the Sacramento Kings in the first round, I think you win that series. They have nobody to really stop Anthony Edwards. And they have Sabonis, who doesn't space the floor, so you feel comfortable playing Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert can really be that anchor defensively that he is in the regular season, because Sabonis isn't pulling him away from the rim. And then you can play your big lineup with having Cat at the 4 like you want to, because Cat wants to play on the perimeter and match up with Keegan Murray anyways. I just don't think the Kings have the defense to stop you, even with your struggles offensively. I think the Wolves' defense can pose problems by taking Sabonis really out of the series, like Sabonis really was last year with Draymond Green. Draymond and Rudy Gobert, 2 different kinds of defenders, but he can really pose a challenge to Sabonis and being able to slow him down, because he, I feel like, is the main engine of this offense with all the actions they do off of him. But I think the Wolves, if they were to match up with the Kings, is a very favorable matchup compared to some of the other matchups they can find themselves in. Now we're getting into the nightmare scenario. I think it's the Lakers. A combination of the Lakers and the Warriors, because the Lakers more so, I think, can pose problems if the Wolves kind of have this consistency of not being able to get buckets late in the game. And I think a matchup where you have LeBron and AD, you could really say they have the 2 best players in the series, can get scary for the Wolves. I mean, you have a series where you have LeBron and AD can pose a lot of problems. And then I have kind of a slash to the Warriors too, just because of where they are. If these are the two teams that win the play-in, just because the Warriors can bring Rudy Gobert and kind of neutralize him in the series with going small and having a Draymond Green that's going to be playing more so on the perimeter offensively, it can really negate a lot of the things Rudy Gobert does defensively. And I think that can pose a problem to the Wolves. So a nightmare scenario for the Wolves is definitely a team like the Lakers and the Warriors. Just because you would go into those series not having the best player. When you play the Lakers, you're not going to have... You don't even have the top two best players. And I think that can be worrisome, especially if these teams are healthy down the stretch. Next team, second seed, OKC Thunder. I'm going to go into this lightly because I've seen people talk about OKC and be realistic about OKC, get called and labeled haters. I think people are a little too high on this team. I understand statistically and everything else that they're playing great regular season basketball, but I have a kind of a question, two questions in one. Are they too young, and are they too small? See, I think it's very interesting because they don't really have a backup big, per se, behind Chet Holmgren. And I think their roster still has some tweaking and a lot of holes they do need to fill. But looking at a dream scenario would be a team like the Warriors. If they were to match up with them, kind of in the same realm of who would win the play-in. A team like the Warriors plays exactly how OKC wants to play. They want to play small. They want to play up and down. They want to get in their isolation spots. They want to shoot a ton of threes. But it's a great matchup because they don't really have anybody to really necessarily put on SGA. They more so do it by committee with the Warriors. And Chet and Draymond, them just not having a big body to bang Chet Holmgren around is the reason why it's a good matchup. Could they lose the series, and could we see a world where it's kind of like last year where the Kings got there a little prematurely and matched up with the Warriors, and we saw how that went because Steph Curry went nuclear in that series. We could see a world like that, but I think this is a tailor-made matchup for OKC because they're playing a team that wants to play exactly like them. Now, on the flip side, I got two nightmare scenario teams that they could possibly play in the first round. I got the Pelicans and I got the Kings for two different reasons. The Pelicans more so because the Pelicans have a lot of long athletic wings that you can throw that you can throw on SGA. And they don't really have anybody that is posing a threat to Zion Williamson just getting to the rim. I understand Chet's a good shot blocker. I promise you Zion Williamson ain't thinking about that. Zion Williamson can get to the lane at will. I like what they've been doing. Put him at like more of the small, like point forward, small ball five, if you call it, at times in the game. You have a bucket getter and Brandon Ingram that can give them problems, and CJ McCollum. I really think the Pelicans are the most dangerous team in the West. They're kind of a sleeping giant, in my opinion. And the other team is the Kings, because the Kings also want to get up and down. The Kings might not have the defense to stop you, but somebody like a Sabonis, this is where a Sabonis would really eat in the playoffs, I feel like. Because Chet, like I said, is a great shot blocker. I think can be neutralized by a bruiser like a Sabonis. Like Sabonis, and OKC struggles on the boards. I can see a world where Sabonis is putting up 20 and 20 on this OKC Thunder and being a driving force to making it more of a series than it should be. I think the lack of kind of big man presence and Sabonis being a bruiser that he is, I can see a world where Chet Holmgren gets in foul trouble and then Sabonis is just eating because they don't really have a backup big presence. Yeah, Bismack Biyombo's cool. He ain't doing nothing with Sabonis. Unless Chet Holmgren is out here spraying the three ball and making Sabonis come out of the lane, and he's not even really that much of a rim protector anyways, I think Sabonis offensively can give OKC problems, and his rebounding can give OKC problems. I think that those two matchups could be very problematic for the Thunder. Super underrated matchups because I feel like the Suns don't really have that interior scorer that can give them problems. I don't think the Mavs really have that either. Lakers are interesting, but I don't think that matchup even happens. But I think the Pelicans having Zion and Kings having Sabonis, having two interior forces on both those teams can really give OKC problems. Especially if they can dominate the boards. And that's not even saying Pelicans with just Zion. You have a Jonas Valanciunas that can come in and give you minutes. That can be a bruiser down low. Because if Chet Holmgren gets in foul trouble, you have nothing for him. Neither one of the guys on either of these teams. I just think these are two teams that are great interior scoring teams that can give them problems. Next team, Denver Nuggets. Dream scenario is the Warriors. A team that they've really owned the past couple of seasons. I think it's just a tough task to ask Draymond Green and guard Jokic all series. And this is more so just going back in history. They've kind of, you can throw the Lakers into this realm as well. They've owned these two teams over the past couple of seasons. And then nightmare scenario, Timberwolves, mainly just because this matchup would happen later down the line if the two teams met later in the playoffs, but more so just because I feel like personally last year, the best team that played Denver and played them the best was the Wolves, because just having size against Jokic is better than having no size. Like the dream scenario for the Warriors with how good of a defender Draymond Green is, he can't match up with him. But even just having this a 7-1 body in Rudy Gobert and another 7-footer in Karl-Anthony Towns can trade off those minutes, size matters. So I think the Timberwolves, just their size, I'm not saying that they would beat, but I'm just saying that they would really make it a hard series, I feel like, for Denver. Just because they have so much size. And they kind of are the team that played them the best last year, because the size played a factor. Even though the Nuggets won that series, that was the toughest I've seen them be tested during their whole championship run last year. And then Nuggets, question is, there isn't one. They're still the team to beat. They're on a 6-game win streak right now. They can turn it on, turn it off as they please. Push comes to shove. They're going to get to the late game situation, and you're not going to be able to do shit with that Jamal Murray-Jokic pick and roll. Because getting to the pick and roll, Jamal Murray gets off it. You got Michael Porter Jr., who can be a lob threat or can spot up in the corner, who's 6'10". You got the Aaron Gordon in the dunker spot, ready for the lob from Jokic. And then you got KCP, who you can't leave on the wing. So, and don't let Jamal Murray be hot that game, because then there's really nothing you can do. I think they have the most unstoppable two-man game in the league. In the league. No matter who you have on. I've seen Anthony Davis, the best interior defender in all of basketball, have no answer for this pick and roll game. No answer. I've seen no team have a single answer for what to do with this pick and roll game late game against the Denver Nuggets. And I think they are still just the team to beat. I don't think there's a team outside of the Boston Celtics that I would pick to beat Denver. And I don't even think I would take Boston to beat Denver. Just because you have the best player in the world on your team. Next team, got the Clippers. Main question, health, and are they going to show up? Clippers, man, they're a team that I want to see win so bad. And I think this is one of the better years to do it, because you wouldn't say, in my opinion, I think the Denver Nuggets are just head and shoulders in the Western Conference. I don't think they fear a single person out here in the West. But there's a lot of good teams. But I think the Clippers are, if I were to make a list, I would think Denver's the head and shoulders. And then I'm like, the Clippers. If the Clippers are healthy, they are the second best team in the West, in my opinion. I really do believe they are. With the talent on their roster, the coaching, the versatility they can have in some of their lineups, they can play a little bit bigger. They can go small ball with all wings. So I think it's very interesting to see if they can manage to stay healthy, because I do think this is a year, if there's any year to do it, to get to the finals for the Clippers. Dream scenario, you play the Kings in the first round. I don't think the Kings don't have anything for Kawhi or PG or Harden. You kind of have free will to do whatever you want with the Kings in a 7-game series. And you can neutralize Sabonis in a way because you have a bruiser and a Zubac who can match up with Sabonis. And then nightmare scenario, Dallas. I mean, we've seen a young Luka Doncic give this Clippers team hell in the playoffs. This is the best team Luka's had, in my opinion, top to bottom. With how I see Luka play against the Clippers consistently, and you give him Kyrie Irving, I don't want to see the Mavs if I'm the Clippers. Because Luka's proven he can get it done by himself against you. Even with a Kawhi Leonard, a Paul George, two of the best perimeter defenders in all of basketball, it don't matter. If you play Dallas, it's going to be tough. I'm not saying Dallas will beat the Clippers in a series. Nightmare scenario, this would be probably the toughest matchup they could get in the first round. If they were to match up, or the second round, this would be the tough matchup for them. Because I think Dallas matches up with them nicely because they can kind of go all small with a bunch of wings and Luka and Kyrie. And they can also now, with the added big man depth, play a little bigger for those lineups where you have Zubac out on the floor. So it's going to be very interesting. I think Dallas can be a lot of teams' kryptonite in the playoffs. Next team is the Pelicans. Pelicans, the biggest and most dangerous sleeper team in my opinion, because they can go small, they can go big. I love what Zion's doing with the basketball. I feel like he's kind of starting to really find that role with the Pelicans to where like this is what he should be doing. I feel like a lot in the past years they've kind of, without the injuries and just seeing him on the court, they're kind of trying to figure out what to do with him. I really like what they've been doing with him recently, putting him more in a real true point forward role and having other guys play around off of him. But even the depth, I mean, you can have crazy lineups with length and size and defense and shooting. And then you can still have your lineups where you have CJ McCollum being your one and really getting off with him and BI being a real two-man game on the floor. But they are a versatile team that can really match up with anybody. They can really match up with any of these teams. They are a real Swiss Army knife team. When I'm looking at, they can score, they can shoot, they can defend. They don't really have too many holes on this team. With the lineups that they do have, if they stay healthy, they can really be a problem. I mean, I saw a couple years ago, Brandon Ingram on this team without a Zion Williamson give the Suns hell as the 1 seed. Give them hell as the 1 seed. And that was a team that had a Mikal Bridges, who was one of the better defenders in all of basketball that year. So looking at it in that kind of aspect, the Pelicans can match up with a ton of different teams. Dream scenario for them, I think it's the Thunder. I truly do. I think Zion can give this team hell on their interior. I understand Chet can block some shots. Like I said earlier, I promise you Zion ain't worried about Chet Holmgren in the paint. Promise you he not. I think they can give them a ton of problems with the way they can switch and the lineups that they can put out there to go run up and down with OKC. And I think that could be a dream scenario for them, comparing a nightmare scenario I do have for them, like the Timberwolves. Timberwolves can make shit hard because Minnesota is so big on the interior with the Rudy Gobert. I know Cat's not the greatest defender in the world, but he's still 7 foot. So you have that front court that can really give Zion problems when it comes to getting to the basket. And that's what he wants to do. And you could say he's their best player. So if you can... The Wolves more so are a nightmare scenario because they can kind of neutralize the other team's best player with their size. That's where I'm getting it at when I see the Pelicans. And again, I still think the Pelicans can match up with the Wolves with their size and their length defensively. But I think they're the biggest sleeper team in the league. I truly do. I think they're the biggest sleeper in the league. They have everything you would want to have. You have B.I., who's a bucket getter down the stretch. CJ McCollum's a bucket getter down the stretch. You have a defensive monster in Herb Jones who can guard 1 through 4. You have Zion who can bully anybody in the paint. You have a Jonas Valanciunas who can bully anybody in the paint, rebound the heck out of the ball. You got Trey Murphy who can stretch the floor. Like, you have Jose Alvarado who can be a pest. Like, you have a deep roster who can do a lot of different things. So, I'm excited to see what this team can do in the playoffs if they get the right matchups. Next team, the Suns. Number one question, are they going to be healthy? That's always going to be the question with these super teams and these big three-esque teams built around all of the big three. Can they stay healthy? Dream scenario for the Suns. I did put Denver. Just because I feel like they're one of the only teams that can really keep up with Denver on the offensive end if Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal are healthy. I'm not saying anybody wants to play Denver, but I think they could keep up with Denver scoring. I really do. Because I think you have enough star power and enough just pure bucket-getting guys in Devin Booker and Aaron Gordon and Bradley Beal to just give Denver hell. I truly do think that. Because you got to think, if you're matching up, you probably got Aaron Gordon on KD / Michael Porter. Then you got KCP on a Devin Booker or Bradley Beal. You would really need Bradley Beal to hoop in the series like that. But it all comes down to health. It all comes down to health. Nightmare scenario for the Suns, kind of like the Clippers. Luka Doncic has just had his way with y'all. We've seen Luka Doncic bounce y'all out of the playoffs. We've seen Luka Doncic do what he wants at will against you. And there ain't been shit you could do about it. Now you're giving him a Kyrie Irving. And I think the best team he's ever played with. That's a tough matchup for Phoenix. Saying that they don't have anybody that can guard him. Not a single person that can guard him. And they do have offensive firepower of their own. Dallas isn't the greatest defensive team. But it's just Luka. And I guess Jokic in a way. It's hard to really find a dream scenario for the Suns. Because I think all the teams have a way to give them problems. And all the teams that they could play, because they're the 6th seed right now, a team that they could play in the first round is a Denver. I think they could possibly give, I think, a better dream scenario, I think it is OKC. I think they could beat OKC in a series compared to Denver. I think I'm going to change that. Dream scenario for the Suns is OKC. Nightmare scenario, I'm going to go the Mavs. Because I think Luka has just had his way with them historically. Sacramento Kings. Here's the thing. I think Sacramento is a team. If there's any team out west to be like, we want to play y'all, it's the Kings. Well, just let me name these teams. Cool. Warriors are a 10 seed. God, they've been hot post all-star break. Do you really want to play Steph Curry in the playoff series? We saw what happened last year with the Kings. Do you really want to do that? Championship pedigree team. I personally wouldn't want to play them. Lakers, damn, Bron and AD, we would like our chances with another team. Mavs, Luka, Kyrie, we like our chances with another team. Phoenix, damn, Book, KD, Bradley Beal, healthy, probably don't want to play them. Pelicans, they can guard, they can shoot, there's a lot going on over there. They got multiple guys that can beat you on any given night. Don't want to play them. Clippers, hell no, you don't want to play the Clippers. PG, Kawhi, Harden, if they healthy? No. Denver, you already know. Minnesota, they pose a problem. Still got question marks. OKC, right now, with the way SGA playing, you probably don't want to play them. And then you're looking at the Kings. You're like, okay, Golden State gave you the blueprint last year. Sabonis didn't really play good in the playoffs last year. It's really the others with Sacramento Kings is my question. The Kevin Huters of the world, the Keegan Murrays, the Harrison Barnes, Malik Monks. Like, who's that second option when Sabonis can kind of fade out of games at times? Who is that guy in that starting lineup that is purely going to be consistent? Kevin Huerter, up and down. Keegan Murray, up and down. Malik Monk, he's your sixth man. He's your spark plug. Harrison Barnes, up and down. So they really have play it by committee, which I think can benefit a team. But when I'm looking at the Western Conference, they can get picked out and be like, I'd rather play Sacramento over any of these other 9 teams. Just because of their roster construction. I mean, they're a team that loves to get up and down, but they're also a team that struggles to guard. So a lot of the star players on other teams are going to get off against Sacramento. But that's my main thing with Sacramento. I think the dream scenario for them is the Thunder. Because I think they can match up well with the Thunder. I think Sabonis can have a great series against a smaller team like OKC. But a nightmare scenario is really any of these teams. You can pick any of these teams and I can name you a way that team can beat Sacramento. Not any shade to throw to Sacramento. I still think they're a very good team and anything can happen and they could upset one of these teams, but I'm looking at them compared to these other teams in the West and I'm like, I'd probably rather play Sacramento over the other 9 teams. I like my chances of playing Sacramento against the other 9 teams. That's how I would go into it. Like looking at it from at Sacramento from these playoff teams. But next team, Dallas Mavericks. Main question, can Kyrie and Luka get them there? If they stay healthy, I think they can. Luka's a generational talent. This is the best team they've had around him, like I've said earlier. Dream scenario, I feel like Clippers. Luka just plays well against the Clippers and the Suns. He just does. He really does. They match up well with both of those teams. Nightmare scenario, Denver. Even with a big man depth that they have added, I just feel like Denver is just a tough matchup for them. And with kind of their struggles they have defensively at times with some of their lineups, it's tough. It's tough. I see a world where they definitely kind of look to expose Luka. And I think Jokic just brings a whole different world of problems for the Mavericks. But you have Luka, you have Kyrie. Anything can happen. Next team, Golden State Warriors. Now, main question I have for them, they're getting hot right now. Can they continue it and get hot at the right time? Because if this Warriors team can get hot at the right time, we've seen Jonathan Kuminga really progress into a great young player. He's kind of been their second option, really, in terms of scoring the basketball, being able to do a little bit of everything. Klay Thompson has been thriving off the bench. Chris Paul, we know what you're going to get from him. Draymond Green has been what Draymond Green usually is. Steph Curry's been up and down a little bit over the past couple weeks. I feel like this is more so due to a little bit of fatigue. But they're getting hot at the right time. When you need to get hot, they're getting hot at the right time. And I think they can, with the right matchup, they can pose some problems for some teams. Man, it's interesting to see because Andrew Wiggins was out with personal reasons. He's going to be back on Wednesday. If they are fully healthy and fully loaded, they can really beat anybody. But I think a dream scenario for them is the Thunder. Because the Thunder are a smaller team that kind of plays a little bit like the way they do. They want to get up and down. And with how the playoffs are setting up, out of the top 3-4 teams, mainly the top 3, I would rather match with OKC than a Denver or Minnesota. Minnesota has a lot of size, can win the rebounding battle against you. Denver has really owned you the past couple of years. Jokic is a problem. You can't match up with him. You have nobody on the roster to match up with him. So it's very, very interesting to see where they go. Very interesting. I think OKC is the best matchup for them. Because OKC is smaller. They can run small ball. We can kind of see a world where Steph Curry can kind of get off, really, against the Thunder. Kind of like he did against Sacramento last year. But I think this Warriors team, has a better defensive identity with the line. Because defensively, the lineup of Wiggins, Draymond, and Kuminga has been elite. Has been elite defensively. So it's going to be interesting to see who they match up with. I think the Warriors have the talent. And if they get hot at the right time, I wouldn't want to play them. And then, nightmare scenario is going to be Denver. Because Denver's just had their way with them past couple years. Last team in the West, the Lakers. Main question, can they get the right matchup? Dream scenario, I think, is the Wolves. I think if you have a team with Bron and AD, you can walk into that series with the two best players. And with the problems offensively the Minnesota Timberwolves have at times, and kind of the questionable decision-making late-game moves that they have made, you add LeBron to that situation, I think they could beat the Wolves. I do. I just have this feeling when I'm looking at the Wolves, I'm like, if they got matched up with a series with Bron and AD, I'm taking Bron and AD. It just is what it is. Nightmare scenario, Denver. Even with as good of a defender AD is, Denver's just had their way with the Lakers the past couple of years. Ever since the bubble, they've had their way with the Lakers the past couple of years. And the Lakers, they're a tough team because if you have LeBron playing the way he's playing at his age and AD playing the way he's played all year, anything can really happen. When you have two elite level guys like that, anything can really happen. I kind of compare it to the Bucks. The Bucks have defensive problems, of course. But when you have Damian Lillard and Giannis playing at a high level, you can beat anybody. And if you have Bron and AD playing at that high elite level, they can beat anybody. But playing Denver, they've just had their number the past couple of years. But more so, transitioning to kind of the MVP discussion in a way. Mainly because I wanted to talk about this player. I wanted to talk about, in my opinion, the most disrespected star, superstar, all-star, whatever you want to label him. Jason Tatum. I think he has been the most disrespected star this season. It's not close. When you're looking at it from a whole, a couple weeks ago, about a month ago, Draymond Green's comments were like, God, he said, basically of the lines of, he doesn't think Tatum will win an MVP until he wins a championship because of the narrative and the early success that Tatum has had in his career is more so, in my eyes, people expect this out of Tatum. I don't think people are understanding how good the Celtics are. The Celtics are a team that is probably going to be a 61 team. They have 48 wins. They are 48-12. 11-game win streak. 29-3 at home. And then you're looking at the MVP, and you see Jason Tatum really almost removed from the conversation in my eyes. People aren't even thinking of him for MVP. Is it because he's had early success? Is it because of the narratives of the Celtics and like people almost want to see the Celtics lose? Is it playoff? You gotta see it in the playoffs. You want to see him do it in the playoffs type of narrative. But when you're looking at Tatum's stats, 27, 8, and 5. And he's not even really top 3 in MVP discussions. Boston Celtics are head and shoulders record-wise above the NBA. They have almost 50 wins. They're about to have 60. They're probably going to have a record of 62-18. Something along those realms. Like, they are head and shoulders above the league, but I'm seeing Tatum get no MVP love. If I'm being honest, the odds are right here. Nikola Jokic is the favorite to win the MVP. I understand your case. I understand your argument. You could say he's the best player in the world. Then SGA is at 2. Then I'm like, okay, SGA is averaging over 30. I understand your case. OKC is a 2 seed, 42-19. But then I'm like, okay, then you have Luka at 3. I understand Luka is a phenomenal talent, generational talent. Then I'm like, Dallas is like in the realm of the play-in. So I'm like, when in the MVP race am I looking at Tatum? And then you're looking at Giannis. The Bucks have had their struggles. The Bucks are a 2 seed. I understand the point for all 4 players. But I think Jason Tatum should be at least at 2. At least at 2. We have to start putting an emphasis on winning when it comes to the MVP award. I feel like we have kind of gotten away from the MVP award being the best player on the best team or just being the best player who puts up the best stats. Because if I'm looking at this, Jason Tatum is the best player on hands down the best team all year round. And he's getting minimal MVP love. And he's having a great year. Now you could say he doesn't move the needle like a Giannis or a Luka or a Jokic. I think he should be above SGA. That's just me. I think he should be above SGA in the MVP voting. But he's not even going to get any love. And then the whole talk of discourse around him winning a championship and then winning MVP that Draymond Green kind of touched on is crazy because he's getting blamed in a sense for having early career success because he was drafted to a team that got better really fast and really quickly and went to multiple conference finals. And with Jason Tatum, we've seen him in the playoffs. He's had his ups, we've had his downs. But for him to get no MVP love, I think it's criminal. For a team that has dominated, we haven't seen a team dominate the NBA like this in a long time. Since the KD Warriors. They are dominating the league. They're blowing teams out by 50. They have 3 wins of 50 plus points this year. They are dominating the NBA. And their best player, Jason Tatum, who's having a phenomenal year, is getting no MVP love. None. Bare minimum in my case. I'm not saying he should go out here and win MVP. At least he should be second. At least in just looking at betting odds. He should probably be second. I would have him above SGA. I'm having him above Giannis. I'm having him above Luka. And Joel Embiid has been taken out of this equation already. So when I'm looking at it from that perspective, I think he's becoming one of the most underappreciated, disrespected stars in the league. In my opinion. I truly do believe that. I think Jason Tatum should be well within MVP discussions, and I feel like people are taking what he does for granted, because just because something is expected, you cannot take it for granted. I feel like I've done this personally with a lot of NBA players, just talking about the game and everything else like that. Just because somebody is expected to do something does not mean it isn't great. Just because we expect this out of Jason Tatum, because we've seen Jason Tatum be good and be great for years now, and he's still so young. Just because we expect him to do that, and when he does it, does not mean it's not great. But looking at that, that's all I have for this episode of Let's Talk About It. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Barrel Talk Podcast. Hope you see you tune in to future episodes.